Nice job, Armorlite. Another one that just looks like the product should look. Okay, welcome back to the channel. We're back in the shop today, working on a couple of things related to the Armorlite in the back of the Jeep and some additional cabling, some additional cameras. So let's jump right into what we're doing, and we'll talk about what we're doing and why. Okay, first thing you're going to notice is we've got the trim off the back of the tailgate. This is something that just pops off, so you grab a hold of it and give it a good yank, and the clips that hold into all of these little slots will come free. Might take a little bit of a pull. And then what we've done is we've run a wire that comes through this grommet here alongside the existing wire that we've got for the CB antenna. This is for a second antenna that's going to be run back here. That comes through, comes out here, comes back in. We've undone the tape on the beginning of this loom so that we can run the wiring through the loom and then right alongside our existing antenna wire back towards the front of the Jeep. So we've got this trim piece pulled off. Again, you pop the cover that sits here, you pop the cover that sits here for the seat belt, and then pop the clip that sits in this little slot down here on the bottom. Pop that up. Everything else just comes back. Similarly, on the passenger side, we've removed the trim. Same idea. You pop the clip that sits here, pop it up. Everything else just comes this way. There is a clip that sits back, I believe it actually sits on the end of this ground. That is a bit of a bugger to get that one to come loose. It could possibly be this clip here, but it was a little bit of a trick to get it to pop out. But once that one was off, the rest of this comes off and we're out of the way. So the reason we've got all the covering off is because of this additional antenna cable that we're running, as well as we're running wiring to support this reverse-facing camera. Now, what I've actually done with this is another Wolfbox unit, similar to what April runs on Penny. This is actually normally the forward-facing unit. We've decided to mount that rearward with a higher quality camera facing the rear of the vehicle, and then the wiring for it that comes down. And ultimately, we needed to be able to exit the rear of the vehicle to run the front camera, as well as accessing the pigtail here for the accessory power. This is going to go into our Wolfbox hardwire kit to provide power to the camera when the ignition is on. Then we're going to install the rear Armorlite flooring package, and that'll take care of the rear wheel houses as well as patching everything up. And so, you know, we didn't need to remove the trim for the Armorlite, but we did need to remove it to access the wiring, and it'll be that much easier to put the Armorlite in while the trim is out. Okay, so with this, what we're going to do is actually trim back the tape just a little bit so we can get a pigtail to work with to introduce our additional wiring splices. And so you can get a adapter that plugs onto the end of this if you think this is something you might want to undo. In my case, I don't have the adapter, don't want to wait for it to show up, and I don't anticipate needing to reclaim the hardwire harness anytime soon. Okay, and the whole point of that is just to give myself enough in here that we can work with it in terms of splicing these wires. We're going to go ahead and strip them. I'm stripping these just a little bit longer because I'm going to use the solder stick to attach, and so I want to make sure that I've got plenty of copper exposed to be able to get the overlap with the solder stick. And now, we need to deal with our Wolfbox harness. The big question on this is how long, or how much of the harness, because they give us a fairly significant amount of wiring here, how much of this do I actually need? Okay, this is the end that goes up to the camera. And this end goes back to the vehicle to connect to the power for the vehicle. So with the hardware kit for the Wolfbox, you've got this longish wire that goes off and ends in a USB-C connector. This goes to our camera. And you have this other wire that comes off. This goes to our power source. And technically it's looking for a constant, a switched, and a ground. And in this case, what we've got is only the switched and the ground off of the accessory. So we'll have to make a choice about how we want to handle that. This box in the middle is actually important because that provides for a power shutoff to prevent the camera from drowning or killing your battery. Without this, you could potentially have a situation where the camera's running and the vehicle battery goes dead over a period of time. So what we want to do next is going to be to go ahead and route this wire from the camera down into this area and figure out how much of this wire we're going to keep. Okay, so routing our wires from the camera here. We've got a headliner in the Jeep, which provides a little bit of a trim piece that's black, so you can only just kind of see here where the wires disappear, and then it disappears behind the trim. And so we've been able to tuck it behind the trim all the way down, bring it around the back side of the latch here, and then into this back corner. And I know the lighting is terrible, but there's a grommet that sits here on the edge of the plastic. And so then this comes down and leaves us with our little box. Now, the box we want to keep. The rest of this wire we don't need. And so we're going to trim it fairly short to match up with these leads here and allow us to probably tuck the box. I'm thinking maybe back up in this area underneath the seat belt. We'd like to not have something that rattles, but at the same time tuck that away someplace safe. Okay. Wolfbox cable's been cut to length, and now I just need to strip it so that we can make the connections with the vehicle harness that's been spliced here. Just like that. We'll get my heat gun and we'll make the connections. Give that just a moment to cool, and then we'll do the same for the other connection. Making the second connection. Now it's important from the Wolfbox that this is the red wire going to an accessory switched wire. This allows the camera to determine when the vehicle is in motion, being driven, versus when it is parked. With the way it is set up, the camera will never draw power from this wire. It just uses it to set up a switch to tell it what mode it's in. The yellow wire is the one that has to have power in order for the camera to be able to function. And we're going to run a separate yellow wire all the way to the battery with a fuse to provide full function of the Wolfbox in terms of its ability to also record while the vehicle is parked in the event something unfortunate happens in a parking lot. Okay, so to conclude on this little bit of wiring, we've now spliced in the ground and the accessory plus for the Wolfbox hardware kit, as well as running the new yellow wire that's going to go down back to the battery. So I'm actually routing it through this grommet that's in the back here. That drops down into the tail light area, and then through that grommet I'll run that alongside the frame all the way up to the engine compartment, which is also how we're running the additional wire for the second camera with the Wolfbox. So that basically concludes that part of the setup. Now, before I put the Armorlite in, I want to do one more wire on this side. It's a pretty common mod that we see people do, which is to take and run a ground from the tailgate back up into the body or down to the frame. And ultimately I will probably do both, run it to the body and to the frame. The idea here is that we're attaching antennas to the tailgate. The tailgate is by itself not usually a very good ground plane, so we try to improve the ground plane by adding some additional electrical connections. So finishing up the conversation here about the grounds, we added the additional ground here that goes up to, this is a hinge bolt on the back side, and likely its counterpart here is where we would actually, if we needed to run a separate ground to the antenna plane or something on the outside. So doing that, you could get very carried away with this in terms of, you could jumper this bolt to 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 this bolt, and then come all around the bottom and try to tie all of this structure together so that it's all there. But really for our purposes, one here is sufficient, and so we just put an additional nut on the back of this plate here that holds the hinge on it, and then we went ahead and ran that wire down again through the loom. We've now tightened up the loom, closed it up with the zip tie. It comes out here on the other side, and we've brought it up and tied it to the body mount there. Now what we'll probably do is run a separate one from that body mount, or that stud there that's in the body, run that down to like on the frame or something of that nature before we button this all up for reals. But that gets us to a point where we've got a good electrical connection between the body and the tailgate. Okay, now I'm going to work on trying to get the Armorlite pieces tucked in place. This is a smaller piece that I believe is going to fit here in the driver's side, up here at the front. So the idea is to tuck this around the seat, around the cover here, and around the plastic. Again, they say you don't have to take it out, and I did it not because I needed to for the Armorlite, but because of the additional wiring. It should make some of the tuck this around conversation a good deal simpler. Okay, well, one side in, just kind of massage it into place, and yes indeed it does have little slots and places where things overlap and underlap. You have to get it tucked in around the door latch here so that everything sits like it's supposed to, but eventually just kind of massage it in there and it will fit. once your new flooring is in, you go ahead and reinstall the trim. Just the reverse of taking it out. Snap it back into place, and everything fits nice and tight and looks very much like an OE factory kind of fit. So nice job, Armorlite. Another one that just looks like the product should look. Okay, so I'm still not sure if this actually would have been easier to not take the trim out or not, but that is the other side of the Armorlite trim in. And then, of course, this is the driver's side. We'll go get another look at it from the other angle. Looking at it from this side, you can see it overlaps the front flooring just a little bit. Gives you that nice finished sort of look. It comes up, lays nice, tucks underneath, and then up underneath the subwoofer enclosure. And behind the trim plates there. And again, just all nice and neat. Okay, we're kind of coming down to the home stretch on our Armorlite install. You've got the Armorlite cargo cover or cargo flooring kind of situated in place, but they do note that for these models that there's a need to trim because of the trench cover flap on the back of the seat. However, they do include a line that you can see right here, right across here, this score line to indicate where to cut, because this is necessary in order to accommodate the trench cover. So now that we've identified where that trim line is, we'll need to do that. And then in order to retain the function of the cover here that flips up, it will be necessary to trim the flooring as well. I want to retain that capability, this function. And again, we see that there's a spot here. And again, kind of a line to follow. And we'll just trim that all the way out to the back so that the Armorlite floor can lift up and allow us access to this little cubby area that's underneath. I guess you could just delete this cover completely, but I feel like the support that this provides is necessary. And then when I install my Tuffy Security deck in here, you know, the other option would have been to not trim this, in which case the whole thing would flip up. But again, with my Tuffy Security cover, that's not going to work because it actually attaches to these other pieces. And because what actually secures this to the bottom is these pieces, those are going to have to be retained. So next up is to do some trimming. And this is pretty much going to wrap up the Armorlite install. So we've got the cargo mat in, and I've got my Tuffy Security Enclosure back in place. You can see that when it's all said and done, the enclosure comes right down to the bed tread, or it comes all the way right down onto the Armorlite, and then all the way around. So it does close up and makes the enclosed area here nice and tight and clean. They do provide the scribe marks if you want to retain the lift up enclosure and have access to your jack and the little cubby hole. So you just cut those scribe lines and away you go. Definitely a little bit of a challenge getting it in on this one. A lot of this I think is due to the making things that were never designed to fit together work in the same vehicle. I'm a big fan of the enclosure in the back. Keeps the stuff that is in my Jeep out of other people's sight. Also keeps it from trying to run over the top of my dogs in the back seat. So this is kind of the price you pay for making things work. But I think in the end this is going to work out well. Okay, picking up on the hardwire kit for the Wolfbox and the wiring for the front camera. Remember that where we dropped off, we had run the wiring through the back here into the taillight area, and then dropped it out, coming out here in the wheel well. What we've done since is to fish the wires along the frame rail to the front of the vehicle. And that's taken the same route that we did with the rock lights when we put them on, and I would encourage you to go revisit that video if you want to see the detail of how that was routed. Coming up here to the front, we're going to take the same pathway up into the engine compartment that we took with the rock light wiring as well. So that's coming up here just forward of the front control arm, comes up over the top of the frame again, and then there's a path right up the firewall that's relatively easy to access with the fish tape. We then took the wiring for the front camera and basically followed the frame rail up and over, again following the same routing that we took for the rock lights, because this is our front rock light wire here. Brought it forward and all the way forward now out to the front bumper. So this basically gets us to the location where we want to be able to put the front camera, and that wiring is done, routing it along that way. The wiring for the direct connection to the battery will come up right here. Really, it will come up right here as we fish the fish line up and out of the vehicle. So again, on the Wolfbox, we've run the yellow wire that's come up the back of the firewall. We've run it across the back of the engine compartment and over here to where the battery is at. Now again, if you remember the rock light video, our upfitter wiring is right here for all of the switches and power feeds for the auxiliary stuff that Mopar provided. But on this side, because the battery is right here, they're not providing a constant battery feed. So what we will do is go ahead and put a inline fuse here in this yellow wire, and then we will put a ring terminal on it and come right up and connect to the battery at this point here. And that will conclude the wiring for the battery side of the Wolfbox. And then since we've already got the wiring all the way out here to the front bumper for the camera, again this is just following the rock lights and the wiring here for our bumper light. And for the moment our camera is right here. Thinking I may relocate the camera. I'm liking the idea of maybe marrying the camera, having it sit like right on top of the camera here. Now that's the trail cam, or maybe just below it down in this area. There's some interesting things that kind of snap into the grill at this location. So may move it a little bit, but we'll start with the camera here on top of the winch and see how that works out. And so with this wiring already here, and this is the end of the camera wiring right here, we'll just need to coil that up, tie it off, and probably go ahead and tie it off here under the grill, where that's good. So that'll conclude the installation of the Wolfbox. Coming back to our antenna mount here on the back of the Wrangler. Done a little bit of low-tech CAD, cardboard aided design, and kind of mocked up what a mounting plate would be, which can hold my CB antenna, my flag, sand flag holder, as well as accommodating an NMO mount, and kind of planning ahead, thinking about the idea of there's always something else that comes along that wants to attach to the back of the Jeep. So planning ahead for that and making sure that I've got clearance around my spare tire. And I got to admit, it's going to be tight with the CB mount back there, but I think it'll be okay, at least as long as I don't move to a significantly wider tire in the near future. So that'll be okay. Now, some would argue that having multiple antennas that close together is going to create problems, and I would agree there's at least a potential for that. The reality, though, is that I'm not likely to use or have more than one of these antennas mounted at the same time and actually be using them. So while there is a potential for some interference between the antennas, I think it's pretty minimal as far as the problems that I'm going to have with that. So next up is to take this apart and cut this piece out of a little piece of steel. And there's our bracket. So what I'll do is just trace it. Onto the piece of steel. Can't do that and hold the camera at the same time. At least not very well. Let's see if this will work. Something like that. And then just like that, cut that out of the piece of steel, and we'll have this done. Okay, cut the bracket out. Test fit it one last time, made sure all the holes were in the right place, applied a coat of paint to it, as it is steel. We want to avoid rusting. Ideally, this would be out of something like stainless steel that would be inherently rust preventative, but this will work out well, and I'll just have to scuff the paint a little bit around the antenna holes to allow good grounding for the antennas, and we'll be good to go. Alright, finishing up the antenna bracket here on the back of the Wrangler. So we've got our bracket that we cut out of steel, painted, and then turned around and scuffed where the antennas actually mount, so that we can ensure a ground contact for the antennas when they're there. So then this just goes in place, lining up on that center hole to the hole in the Jeep, and then we'll pull it together with the CB antenna on the inside, flag holder in the center, and the NMO mount here on the outboard with a fourth hole for future use. There's a little bit of a order of operations, and that we need to connect the CB antenna first. Alright, CB antenna connected first. That one requires two hands. And this is the bracket for the mount for the sand flag. It's the walk washer and the nut. Okay. And now we bring up the NMO mount. Alright, and with the three mounts installed and tightened down, we've got, again, our CB antenna mount here, our sand flag mount that is super solid for being able to support that 6 feet of sand flag, and our NMO for our UHF, VHF antennas. For illustrative purposes, because I don't really ever expect I would have all three of these mounted in use, but all three antennas in place, and confirming that yes indeed it all clears the glass. We're good in that respect, and they all attach to that bracket just like they would expect them to. So the antennas, the sand flag, and the other.